Hello, hello, hello. This is Cremechiss, and I am Suri, and I am back again with another movie for the week. I am so thrilled for this one. I have been wanting to recommend this for a long time, and I'm so happy that the schedule finally caught up with what I want to talk about. And this week, I would like to discuss once again a very sweet story, a very adorable story. The story of, well, a, a thing. Can you imagine the protagonist of a story being an object, an inanimate object? Although, as you watch the movie, you will perhaps think that this object is magical and it is in some ways, has a life of its own. And the movie is unique, the movie is magical because of the way the story is set up. Let me give you some context. Have you noticed the trigger warnings that movies have these days? For example, warning, this movie has graphic violence, explicit language, nudity, etc. It's such a common part of movies, shows these days that it's kind of become part of storytelling. We are almost desensitized to it. Like we have been numbed. Slash movies, violent movies, movies on betrayal, movies that are based on very dark storylines, dark characters. That's kind of become the expectation. So tell me this, where does all the good go? Where does all the warmth and the fuzziness of storytelling hide? And if you're like me, you are definitely a sucker for feel good cinema, which is why my recommendation for this week is an amazing movie that is not only underrated, but is so well made that it will make you sob some really happy tears. So, what does this movie have? Great cinematography. And when I say great, I mean picturesque. Not one scene is short of a masterpiece, and everything is beautiful. Great actors, a beautiful style of narration, and above all, the most unique disclaimer that you will have ever seen. The movie literally starts with this message to the audience where it says this movie is depicting a time where the world was innocent and naive and believed in the good of people. Now, the makers of this movie are trying to warn us of our skepticism. Like they're trying to tell us to leave our cynicism behind and appreciate the innocence of the time that the movie portrays. The movie's name is Cycle, 2018, heavily underrated Indian movie. This movie was made in the language of Marathi, but do not worry. If you do not understand Marathi, there are fantastic subtitles. And as a person who understands that language, I can tell you that the movie has done full justice to its dialogues, which is why the subtitles were like so beautifully translated. It is currently on Netflix and it is truly a masterpiece. Let's talk about the hero of this movie. Now, the hero gets a really darling introduction. The hero's name is Keshav, and he's played by a very talented Rishikesh Joshi. He plays this sweet man who, is just like this regular family man. He is well loved, well liked. In fact, being called well loved for Keshav is an understatement. He is truly the beacon of all that is good and pure in the world to the village that he lives in, even the surrounding villages adore him because he helps everyone. He shows up for everyone in their time of need. Now, the movie starts with this really cute scene where Keshav has stopped by a school to pick up his little kid, Mrinmai, and she's this adorable little child. And if this scene does not get you hooked onto the universe of Cycle, I will eat my words. It's so cutely portrayed because whenever you think about being picked up from school by your parents, especially, there is a kind of plastic environment to it when you see it in a movie where, the parent will drive and then, the kid will hop into the car and they'll ask about their day, etc., etc. But this scene is not treated that way. This scene is treated in a very realistic manner. And it really made me nostalgic for the days I would rush to my dad and he would come pick me up from school. And it was it was a matter of pride, when your dad came to pick you up. It was a big deal. And that's what the scene kind of showcases, because Mrinmai, like most little kids, adores her father. And you can see that in the scene. You can see her staring up at her father with all love and all kinds of admiration for him. And her father is clearly a hero. And you get that immediately from the scene. There are no dialogues that happen in the first couple of minutes, but you get to enjoy the softness of the scene. You get to enjoy the comfort that the scene brings. She hops onto his cycle, and Keshav drives off the cycle with her between his arms, and he asks her how she's doing and how her day at school was, and she says, "I want to hear a story." And the father goes, "Oh God, not again with the cycle story, because the cycle story has been told to you like 100 times." But she wants to listen to the story. And again, let me bring the innocent disclaimer again. This belongs to a time where things were truly pure. There were no smartphones, there wasn't infinite access to media and information. Everything about this movie shows us that we rely on the stories that people leave us with. We may not have any way to fact check them. We may not have any way to verify them. We just trust that the person who tells us the story is telling us the truth. So Keshav starts narrating the story of the cycle, this very special cycle. And he basically explains that his grandfather was this medicine man. And he had multiple talents. He was well versed in medicine. He was very good in astrology, which is also something that Keshav does. He can read astrological charts, birth charts, predict the future, by getting some information off of horoscopes. But Keshav's grandfather was special. His name is Gopal Krishna, and he was very good with identifying illnesses, diagnosing them properly, giving the people the right medicines. And Gopal Krishna is once visited by a British officer who's stationed at the village at that point of time, and he cures him of a stomach ailment. And this officer is so surprised and so pleased by the immediate results of this man's medicine that before he leaves the village, he gives him a parting present. And that parting present is this precious, precious cycle. So the story is really, really beautiful, obviously, because it makes you think, oh, Keshav's grandfather had it, so it is like a family heirloom of some kind. But there is something more to this cycle. Like, the cycle is very unique looking itself. It's a yellow cycle. The place where the bar is on the seat, between the handle and the seat, it's kind of shaped like an eye. Like, it can see things, like it is all knowing, like it's an oracle of some kind. And the cycle is really pretty, obviously, but it's also unique because Keshav's grandfather does not pass this on as a family heirloom. He specifically puts in his will that Keshav should get the cycle. Like, the grandfather chooses to give it to his grandson and not to Keshav's father. So this isn't some kind of, oh, let's, traditionally pass this down generation by generation. This cycle was specially bestowed, granted to Keshav. Because, like this cycle, Keshav is also very special, very dear to his grandfather. And Keshav says this really important line, which I think builds the premise of the importance or the significance of the cycle. He says that his grandfather took care of the cycle, but the cycle also took care of him. So in some ways, Keshav and the cycle are kind of like Thor and Mjolnir. They come together, they come in a set. They are not separate from each other. They are one same entity. And at this point, Keshav's daughter is so impressed, by the story, and then they kind of have like a quick joke between them that, when you grow up, I will give you the cycle. And Ridma is very excited to hear this. She's very happy that her father trusts her with the cycle. And she says something which is kind of silly, but it's just such a unique detail to the story, where she says, I have to tell you something, Dad. This cycle is magical. And the father's like, yeah, I agree, it's magical, it's special. And then she says, yeah, but it flies in the dark. Like this, the cycle, she can actually fly in the dark. And Keshav, of course, like he knows she's just a child and she's saying silly things. So he says, next time you see this cycle flying, let me know. And and the scene kind of just like ends over there between the father and the daughter. But you see that there is this pure innocence that is enveloped in the story over and over again, where you see conversations between fathers and daughters. You see the concept of a traditional generation to generation kind of storyline where something is passed down not because they are related, but because this particular person is special to them, is beloved to them. And that's kind of what introduces us into the universe of cycle. So, coming back to the hero, Keshav is a man with a stellar reputation, and like his grandfather, he likes to help everyone. And there is this one particular scene in the movie that has really stayed with me. So, if you do not believe in astrology, you're just like me. And this scene is probably custom made for the cynics like us. Keshav is visited by a customer who wants his services as his expertise in astrology. And this man's name is Vasant. And he travels really far from a neighboring village. So clearly there is something that is bothering Vasant, but that is not immediately revealed. Vasant just kind of shows up a little stressed out, and he immediately, thanks Keshav for his time and gives him his astrological chart and says, can you please look at this? And Keshav says, oh, how did you find out about me? And Vasant praises him and says, my father spoke very highly of you and your knowledge of astrology. And this conversation is happening in Keshav's house. And you can see like these little details where Keshav's father is kind of like ignoring, this whole dialogue that is happening. And Keshav kind of like looks at his father and tells Vasant to repeat again what he said. And Vasant says, I have heard that you are the best in understanding the sciences of astrology, that you are truly the only person who can predict things correctly. And he looks at his father with a bit of pride and and he's like, well, not only did I get the cycle, but I also got, the knowledge, the knack of reading the stars like grandfather. And it's such a marvelous detail in storytelling, because there are two men who are in a silent power struggle, a kind of silly competition, and you get to see another side of fatherhood. And it's not always sweet and cute like how Keshav has that very adorable relationship with his daughter. He has a bit of a competitive relationship with his father, which is really interesting. Keshav is a very sweet man, very very darling kind of a man who realizes that Vasant has traveled from really far, and he goes, go and have food and let me look at your chart by myself. Now, why these details are important is because they're trying to explain to us again that this is at a time where everything was not, treated like, oh, this is business, this is nothing personal. This, it is just what it is. I have to make money to keep my family alive. This is about a time where people care about each other. So you see a man who is stressed out, he has come to your home, you offer him a meal, you tell him to go to the kitchen and eat. And this movie was very shocking for me, because I have not seen that kind of behavior even like in the real world, let alone like movies is a different thing, but even in the real world, you don't like go to a person and pay them for their services and expect them to give you anything beyond that service. So at that moment I was like, oh my god, is Keshav going to like read his chart and even like greet him with hospitality? That is so sweet. Like what a generous man he is. But they're trying to explain through the scene that was not uncommon, that you could tell a person, you've come here, you want my services, that's great, but please go and eat so that I can do my job. And Keshav reads this man's chart and he immediately looks stressed. And this is the beauty of this actor, where his expressions are all in his eyes, and you can see his body language changing, his shoulders kind of tightening, because when he reads Vasant's chart, he sees something a little disturbing. And you have to give kudos to the actor for pulling off the scene, because there is literally not much dialogue going on there. This is all about reaction and expressions and facial context to understanding what the character is feeling. So Keshav runs to his wife, calls her aside and asks her for money. He then scavenges through the house. He finds loose change and some cash lying around, and he takes all of that, gathers all of it, and stuffs it in Vasant's coat pocket. This scene will reveal something, and anyone who watches the scene or has watched the scene, let me know if you had the same thought in your mind. My cynical mind presumed that Keshav does this. He gathers all that money and he puts it in the pocket of Vasant's coat, because he wants to avoid embarrassment, because he knows that Vasant is not well off. So he kind of puts the money in his pocket, because he thinks, oh, I'm going to ask him for money. I'm sure he doesn't have money. Let him just take the money from that is there in his pocket and give it to me. That way I get my money back. And he's not embarrassed either, because Keshav is a good person, but he also has to run his household, which is understandable. But in the next couple of dialogues, there's a second shocker where Vasant offers to pay him and Keshav refuses. And he shows the audience that not only has Vasant, given him the opportunity to take money from him, he rejects that. Keshav is also a person who has seen a dark outcome in the future of his customer. He can exploit his customer. He can take advantage of Vasant at this point of time. But Keshav, our true hero, chooses not to. And instead, he says, I don't want any money. He never tells Vasant that he puts money in his pocket. So that is how he preserves Vasant's dignity. And he tells him that he has seen a catastrophe in his horoscope. And there is a massive loss which could be on the cards. But he also tells Vasant to not worry, because everything will eventually work out for him. Even though times are dark, he will emerge victorious immediately. And he will also need to take one advice, which is to not form any attachment to materialistic things. And this scene has gotten under my skin, because whenever I've heard a story about a psychic reading, maybe my friend says something, oh my God, my psychic predicted this horrible thing that happened, and it happened. I always wonder if there is some kind of viciousness to that, because wouldn't it make sense for anybody who understands the future, if they truly do understand the future, for them to be considerate and not drop this horrible dark news on them, but give them the assurance that everything will be fine, which is what Keshav does. And even though I don't believe in astrology or its accuracy, Keshav is the man I would talk to if I was ever worried about the future. Unlike most people who claim to understand the stars and their impact on our future, Keshav is this man who just trusts his instincts. He trusts, that he has faith in the science, he has faith in astrology, and he believes in what he preaches, which is why he has empathy for the customers who are struggling. Now, let's talk about the cinematography of the scene. This scene shows us, first of all, entry into Keshav's home. It's a very simple home. He's not very well off himself. But it's very beautiful. It's very simple. It's very clean. You get to see the small kitchen. You get to see, his daughter kind of running and sitting on a straw bed. There's these small, beautiful details that are, shown across several scenes, and it's just beautiful from start to finish. Like, it's kind of like straight out of a fairy tale. And the colors, the angles from which the movie is shot, the way they've shown the people dressed, and they've given like some very genuine details, which I appreciate, because in that time, a lot of the plays that were being shown around India, not a lot of women acted in those plays. In fact, almost never women were in those plays. Men would dress up as women and play the female parts. And they show us in one quick scene where there are these bunch of actors kind of gathered, and you see a man dressed in a woman's sari, and they have given so much, effort in the details, and they've given so much attention to the storytelling of that time, so that everything seems genuine and authentic. Now, you will see small details here and there as well, which is, like the style of the vessels. They look very different from the kind of vessels we use today. The way people pack food, the style of the bags that people carry. Like you see Keshav with a cloth bag that has like all of his, papers and books stuffed in it. The clothes, the way the jewelry was made, everything is different. And because this is the olden days, you see the costumes of the actors are kind of depicting not only the authenticity of the time, but also the authenticity of per person. So a person that is not well off will wear simpler clothes, softer colors. A person that is well off will wear like, you will immediately see a change in their garb. You will see that even though they're not probably decked in jewelry, but you will see that they have a different way of walking, a different way of talking, because they have an economic privilege of some kind. And these little things set up the the village and the world of our beloved Kesha. Now, coming back to the story, an incident occurs that introduces some of my favorite characters um, ever ever made in feel good cinema, and these characters are Gajya and Mange. Um, Gajya is played by one of my all-time favorite actors, Bhav Kadam, also known as Bhalchandra Kadam, and Mange is played by a very talented Priyadarshan Jadhav. And I have to say that these people have shown the most honest portrayal of thieves. And these two thieves are basically shown to us as, these two guys who are dressed in some kind of disguise, and they walk into Keshav's village to rob the houses. And it is planned because it's a small village and there's only one means of entertainment, which is plays. So if there's a play in the village, everybody's watching the play. So everybody's outside of their homes. The thieves take advantage of that, rob a house, and are kind of interrupted by these stray dogs, and they get scared. So they grab the nearest cycle and they kind of run off. Now, no one gets any love for guessing this one, because very obviously they steal our dear Keshav's cycle. Keshav is heartbroken. He's devastated. And he feels like he has failed his grandfather in some way. The villagers slowly find out that the thieves have robbed jewelry and idols from someone's shrine, which is a horrible, blasphemous thing to do to someone, stealing someone's, idols that represent their god or their faith in some way. The villagers are really upset about this incident. But what is funny is when they find out that Keshav's bike was also stolen, they're enraged. They're angry. Even the man whose home was like ransacked, he's more angry that Keshav's cycle was stolen. He's not that mad when he finds out that he lost, like jewelry from his home, but he's so upset when he finds out that Keshav was also a victim. And they all rush to his side to console him, and they promise to help him to find his cycle. There's this very beautiful frame where you see Keshav's daughter, Mrinmay, holding her dad and kind of, trying to console him and soothe him in some way. But he's so sad. You can see it all over his face that he's completely broken. And she knows what the cycle means to her father. However, as, Keshav is trying to ponder and figure out how he's going to get his cycle back, she asks him a question. And this scene happens on a beach. And it is such a soothing scene to watch because you can hear the waves, and it makes complete sense because as the audience you're also stressed out for Keshav, and it's an immediate soother. It's kind of given both for the character and the audience. So you can see the waves crashing, you can hear the sound of the ocean, and you see Keshav walking with like a brooding face, and his daughter stops him and says, can I ask you something? And please don't be mad at me. And he says, fine, ask. And she says, what do you think about the cycle? Like, do you think the cycle was stolen? Are you sure it was stolen? And the father goes, what do you mean, are you sure? Of course it was stolen. And she says, well, I have a different theory. I think your cycle was bored and maybe she wanted a new adventure and escaped. And then she doubles down on that theory and says, your cycle kind of felt imprisoned. Like she was never allowed to be out of your sight. She was never allowed to be with other people. And they kind of show those details to the story where if someone even jokes about taking Keshav's bike, he gets upset. He's so possessive of the cycle. And Mridmay kind of points it out that you have this obsession over that cycle always being by your side at all times. What if the cycle wanted to, like, wanted some freedom, wanted some free will? And Keshav is immediately like more upset by that. Said, how can you say that she wanted to leave me? And we are now officially entering this arena where we're talking about the cycle like a person, like like an actual person that mattered to Keshav. Like he's talking about the cycle like he would about a child. So how can you say that she would leave me? She would never leave. So we get to see the cycle um, as kind of a character that is guiding the stories of both Keshav and the thieves. So on one side, when Manga and Gaja and the others, like they've come out of the village, they're in a neighboring village, they're safe from everybody's eyes, and you see Manga kind of like dusting off the bike and thanking the bike for saving their lives. So you see that the cycle represents two things. It's a legacy for Keshav, but it is a boon of luck for the thieves. And as they're kind of walking through this neighboring village, that with this cycle of Keshav, they realize that it's not going to be very easy to steal that bicycle because everybody knows that that's Keshav's cycle. Everybody knows that, oh, that man who's so sweet to everybody and never allows anyone to share his cycle, that's his cycle. And they notice them and they immediately start inquiring how were they allowed to even touch this cycle. And again, bringing back the disclaimer again, this is about a time where people were truly good to each other. So if they saw something that was suspicious, they spoke about it. They didn't just let it pass by. And Keshav was so famous and so well loved by everyone that he was identified by that cycle. Like there's this scene where the cycle is lying somewhere and someone kind of rushes into the room and goes, oh my God, where's Keshav? Is he here? And they're like, oh no, he's not here. Just a cycle is here. And they look at these two thieves and they go, who are you? What are you doing here? And they make up this bogus story where they say, oh, we are cousins, we are Keshav's cousins. We are very dear to him, which is why we are the only ones allowed to touch the cycle. And there is a sweetness to the scene because when they find out that they are Keshav's cousins, they treat them very differently. Just 2 seconds ago, they were treating them with like suspicion and some amount of anger. But because they claimed to be Keshav's cousins, they were treated with respect and love. One of them even invited them home, fed them food, packs them, some sweets and says, you have to go give this to Keshav, but you don't need these sweets. I'll give you separate sweets to you. Like, it's so cute and it's so endearing that just on the word of someone, right? Imagine putting your faith in a human being just because they said so. It's unfathomable in today's times. But this story represents the exact opposite of that. Said, oh, why would you lie about being Keshav's cousins? Like, why would anyone do something so horrible? Why would anyone rob Keshav's cycle? He's the best guy in the whole world. And the thieves kind of learn through this journey that they did not just steal a cycle, they stole someone's love. And the more they go through the village, they hear more beautiful stories about Keshav. They meet a little boy who runs his tea stall, and they find out that Keshav helped him set up his savings account in a bank. They go to another store and they find out that Keshav loaned, somebody who owns a store some money and never asked for it back. So they say that, oh, you're his cousins, why don't you give back this money? And they just trust that these thieves are Keshav's cousins, and they don't even go to think that these people could just be like, running a fraud and just, robbing people of their money. And you get to see Gaja's evolution and Manga realizing that the cycle is changing Gaja because people are seeing him as a different person. And now Gaja wants to kind of live up to that. He wants to be this great man's cousin because he's given so much love and respect just by being associated with him. And you get to see that even in this time where Keshav is very stressed out, someone, rushes to him for help, and he finds out that this person's mom is, going to pass away. So he sits by her bedside and he holds her hand so that she can, can pass in peace. And that scene is so beautiful because even though everything is going wrong in his life, he's ready to take that time out and just sit by this person who needs to be comforted. And that's the true legacy of Keshav. So there's this beautiful exchange that happens between Gajah and Mangya where they go, is the cycle magic or is the man who owns the cycle magical? And they're thieves, they're illiterate, they don't know much about the world, but they know that Keshav is a good man. They know that Keshav is wonderful. So they come to this realization that all the magic is not in the cycle. It's because of who owns the cycle. And even though they're thieves, they come to this conclusion much quicker than Keshav does, because Keshav is doing everything to find a cycle. He goes to another astrologer to find out if he will get his cycle too. And the astrologer says, you know the future. And what you want to hear from me is the only thing I can tell you, which is everything will work out in the end. And that's pretty much the story. Because two wonderful, life-changing incidents happen. One for Keshav and one for the thieves. So Gajah and Mangya are, walking around the cycle, getting the benefits of being Keshav's cousins and, being seen as very important people because they can touch the cycle of Keshav that is so important to him. And a school principal sees them, who is very good friends with Keshav because he helps promote the academic programs in that school. He says, why don't you come to school? And we are having an awards function. And since you're cousins with Keshav, you could be the guests of honor. Please, please, please come. And these people agree. And they don't know how to get out of it. So they're there. And they are given flowers and sweets. And they're, bestowed with presents and asked to give a speech to talk about the importance of education. Now, this scene is very cute because when they get to the school, the kids kind of surround them and ask them who they are and are so excited to see Keshav's bike because they think Keshav uncle is going to be there. But then they are, of course, told that, oh, this is not Keshav uncle, but his cousins are here and they have come to, surprise you for the school function. And the kids kind of look at their hands and the principal informs them, well, whenever Keshav comes, he brings sweets or chocolates or something with him to distribute with the kids. So all the food that these two thieves are given over the course of time, just because people are convinced that they are Keshav's cousins, they take out that food and they distribute it amongst the kids. And they don't keep anything that they get because of their association, their false association with Keshav. And they're asked to give a speech to encourage kids to keep studying. And Gajah gives such a heartfelt, such a great speech where he says, when people are not educated, they are driven to do bad things because they don't understand the consequences of their actions. Which is why you have to study so that you understand the difference between right and wrong. And Bhaukadam is a profound actor because throughout this movie you will see him nervous and scared that he's going to get caught, and he's done that acting so genuinely. But in this speech he comes alive because he is being treated like one of the normal people. He's not a thief. He has the privilege of being Keshav's cousin. He has the privilege of being a good man of society, a good citizen. And that privilege makes him see the kind of life he could have rather than the life he's living. On the other hand, as Keshav is walking from village to village, he runs into Vasant, the customer who he meets, who he gives the prediction of some bad news for him. And he sees that Vasant's house is completely broken. It's falling apart. It's in shambles. And he finds out from Vasant that the house collapsed because of some reason. And Vasant tells him that I was really sad when I saw that happen. I was worried for my family. I was worried where they would sleep, where they would live. But then I remembered what you said. You told me to not keep any attachment to materialistic things. And I felt a new sense of strength because of your words. And now I'm free because I know that whatever happens will be good in the end. And Keshav realizes, perhaps for the first time, that his obsession over his cycle is a very small little blip in the universe. And here's a man who lost his home, and just on the faith of Keshav's words, is convinced that losing his home is not the worst thing that has happened. Keshav hugs him and then wonders if he should keep continuing to look for the cycle. Now, I'm not going to spoil the ending of the movie for you because I love you and I adore you. And I want you to love and adore this movie as much as I have. So please, please, please give it a watch. Please let me know what you think about it because uh, this is the kind of cinema that we need to watch. We are a generation of cynicism. We see a picture, we wonder if it has a filter. We hear a song, we wonder if it was engineered. We see a response on Twitter, we wonder if it's a bot. We question everything with so much skepticism and negativity. We look for mistakes, we look for errors, we look for flaws, and we celebrate those flaws like it's a good thing. Imagine stepping into a universe where the flaws are what they are. They're flaws. They're not glamorized, they're not celebrated. And the good is what it is. It's not glamorized, but it is adored. It is respected. It is admired. And I really hope that you watch this movie. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. And do let me know if you have watched any of our previous videos as well. We have done some really good recommendations. We put out Derry Girls. Last week, we put out Garud Gamna Rishabh Vahana, also a great film. If you've not watched Vajda, which is another feel-good cinema, check out that review as well, which is also ironically about a cycle. And I really, really hope you like what I have said. And please continue to give us your love. We are seeing you liking, we are seeing you subscribing, but we really want to hear what you think about this channel. This is Suri with Cremechiss, reminding you once again that I love you so much and I hope you have a really, really, really good day. Love you. Bye.